What's going on, guys? It's James, Dynasty League Dynamo. We're going to take a look at wide receivers in Dynasty, their age of regression, and when you should be looking to move them. Stay tuned. Dynamo Nation, what's going on? This is James, and we're talking about wide receivers, specifically wide receivers in Dynasty, and when you should be looking to trade these players. Every position group has that magic age, that magic number when production starts to tail off. Wide receivers are no different. As we've looked, as I've gathered data points that I'm going to share with you here in a minute, wide receivers have a very specific age group where it's shockingly early. We always hear this thing, the wide receivers last, well into their 30s and so on and so forth. But the numbers that I've pulled from the last 2 seasons, it tells a different story. You're going to see right here, we're looking at wide receivers. And this first graph, it's pretty shocking at what we're looking at. This is going to show an overall archetype for these receivers. There's 72 receivers that are being counted. It's broken up. As you can see, we have top 5, so a top 5 finish, top 12, top 24, and then a top 36. So there's 72 individual records in this graph, in this chart. And as you can see, when wide receivers hit the age of 28, the chances of them finishing as even a top 36 wide receiver, you're looking at 13%. That is a very, very low number. It's 1 in 6 would be 16%, so it's even worse than that. But for argument's sake, we'll go 1 in 6. I mean, that's a pretty sad number that we're seeing there. And that changes things for you. You really have to think about it. So obviously you have your exceptions to this. You have your studs, like Devontae Adams is 28, going to be 29. He's going to finish in the top 5. Cooper Kupp is 28, believe it or not. He's wide receiver 1 right now. So you do have your exceptions to this, but overall, you have to factor this in overall. How many 28-year-old receivers are in the league? And the chances of all of them in that pool finishing as a top 36 receiver is only 13%. So you might have the exceptions on your team, but you have to, you look at the numbers, the percentages even drop, it goes down even further the lower you go. So it really has to make us start to think, do we keep these players on our roster and have diminishing return, diminishing value? Players get, Father Time is undefeated. We know this. So players that are on your roster, their skill level, as their athleticism drops, it suffers on the field. So not only do we have players who are going to give us less on the field as they get older, but their trade value is also diminished. Now, this is where we have to finesse our leagues. In these dynasty leagues that we're in, we have to be able to realize and recognize this data and use it to our advantage. This gives us an example of players that trade for, trade away on both ends of this. Look at these numbers even further. When we're looking between the ages of 24 and 27, we're looking at 63% chance of a player finishing in the top 30 or top 72. The 72 receivers that were polled, 63% of these guys finish as a wide receiver 3. When we're looking at those numbers, at least a wide receiver 3. And your best chance of having stud receivers, your top 5 wide receiver 1s, fall in that age range, the 24 to 27. So if you know this going in, right? If we know that players hit, that's when you're going to get the meat of production between the ages of 24 through 27. Okay, so that really gives us 4 years in Dynasty. And in Dynasty, that's a long time, 4 seasons. So when we look at that, we can kind of see these trends. And even the young receivers, surprisingly, I think it's like 24%. 24% are going to finish in the top 36 out of the who we polled, out of the data points. This is a full PPR concept. Out of the top 36 receivers over 2 seasons, 24% of them fell between the ages of 21 and 23. Okay? Same. To me, that was a little bit low. It's pretty close to the 28 and above. I expected it to be higher. I didn't expect 24 through 27 to eat up so much of that pie. We're talking almost 2/3 of that entire production is coming between 23 and 27-year-old receivers. So based on this information, and, and as we go along here, I'm going to be throwing up periodically, like we're going to see the top 5 right now, just a table for the top 5, and you can see this. And look at the ages on that. I mean, it's heavily in that 24 to 27 range. And now top 12. Top 12 is the same thing. All right, top 24, now we're talking wide receiver 2s. This goes down a little bit more. The range gets a little bit wider. And same with the top 36 wide receiver 3s. The range gets even wider there. So, as we can see, like there's nothing wrong with having older players on your team, and for receivers 28 and older, and then 21 to 23 on the receivers, so younger players at the position. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still pull wide receiver 2s and 3s out of this age group, but the chances of you getting a high-end wide receiver 1 or even a top 5 guy, it's not there. So we have to think about that in Dynasty when we're making our drafts, setting up our teams. Of course, we have our anomalies. Justin Jefferson last year, super young, came out the gates, complete stud. Jamar Chase is doing that this year. We're going to have guys like that. So you can't drive everything, but this at least gives us a guide to what we can look for. And that's the whole purpose. Using the information, using as much analytics as we possibly can to guide decisions. It's not the end-all be-all, but it's a tool. And that's what this is for us. So with this information, I want to go over 10 wide receivers that we should be looking to trade right now in Dynasty. And this is based off of the data that we just seen, the age group. So here's our list. Look it over. Couple names. Obviously, Cooper Kupp's on there. He's wide receiver 1 right now. His value is never going to be this high again. If you have him, you can cash in and take the bag from somebody. Like Cooper Kupp can completely, if your team's in a bad spot right now and you have Cooper Kupp, you can completely revamp your entire situation. Draft picks and young players right now. Devontae Adams is on this list, another top 5 Dynasty receiver. Adams, we don't know what's going to happen with Rodgers next year. We don't know what happens with Adams next year. He's kind of made it known if Aaron's not there, he wants out. And who knows where he goes. So you have a lot of stuff hanging over Devontae Adams. DeAndre Hopkins, unfortunately, he's going to be the situation to where we waited a little bit too long. He's still a very solid receiver, don't get me wrong. But in that offense, there's so many mouths to feed that his numbers have taken a huge drop this year. He's no longer a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. He was a consensus, 5 or 6, maybe 7 Dynasty wide receiver before this season started. And you can see how fast things change for receivers when they start hitting that age. So Hopkins, unfortunately, is a must-sell right now. His value is falling, and it's falling quick. So if you have Hopkins, if you're competing, like I said, it's not a problem having him on your team because he's your wide receiver 2 or 3 maybe at this point. And if he is, that's fine. But what you don't want to happen is you don't want to have a team of these guys to where you're banking on them being wide receiver 1s, and now they're your 2s or 3s, when you could have traded them maybe a year sooner and gotten wide receiver 1 value out of them. Hopkins, last year, we probably should have traded Hopkins. If he's sitting on your team, you probably should have traded him last year, having that amazing season with Kyler. He put up crazy numbers. That probably should have been our point where we're like, all right, we've had him at that point 7 years, whatever it was. He's been a stud this whole time. It's time to move on. And the reason to put this list up and talk about this is we have to start identifying these players before we get to that point. If we follow this rule after the age of 27, so if they're 27 when the season starts and they turn 28, that's fine. Don't worry about that. But after that season, if we're looking to maximize value, we need to move these receivers. You should only be carrying these receivers until their age 28 to 29 season if you are a title contender that following year. That's the only way to justify it. Beyond that, you do not want to carry these players age 29 going into their age 30 season. The value is going to decline. And as in Hopkins, it declines drastically. So we need to avoid that. On this list, you're seeing a bunch of different names that have been productive. These are not bad players. These are productive players who still hold value. The worst player on this list in terms of dynasty value right now, probably Adam Thielen. And that's because he's already 31 years old. Thielen's going to be an anomaly, an exception to this. He's still putting up back-end wide receiver 2 numbers. But the issue with Thielen is he's become a red zone target. That's all he's become. If those red zone TDs go away, where's Thielen going to be at if he's not scoring touchdowns? He's going to have very minimal value. So you don't want to get to that point. And a couple years ago, Thielen was the man. He was putting up crazy numbers at the age of 28, 29. And if we could have traded him then, we would have taken the bag. It's the same deal with Cooper Kupp right now. What you're seeing from Thielen could be Cooper Kupp in 2 years. Like Cooper, he's going to be 29 for next season. So I know he doesn't seem that old, but he is. We have to get in front of these things. There's a litany of great young receivers in the league right now that we could be targeting in different deals for these veteran stud receivers. Guys who haven't hit their peak yet. Rashad Bateman is a great example. If you can flip any of these names into a Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney, Waddle, CeeDee Lamb, and I know Lamb's kind of higher up, but if you're trading Devontae Adams or Cooper Kupp, players like that, maybe even Hopkins, you should be able to expect a CeeDee Lamb type receiver back. But this is your last chance. This season is your last chance. And the reason why you can do it right now is because we're in season. We're in season and teams are competing for the playoffs and the title. Use that to your advantage. If you're out of it, you should definitely be doing this. Even if you're in it. Remember, the purpose of a dynasty, don't dominate for a year, do it for a decade. If you can trade your older receivers right now and retool on the fly, maybe you take a step back this year. Maybe you're a title contender right now. I've done this personally, and it's worked out for me. It's extended my window. I've had older receivers, and instead of really pushing the envelope and saying, you know what, I'm going all out for the title right now, which I could have done, but I'm not trading my young players away that I've drafted. And those picks are normally at the back end of the rounds because I've been good. Or I'm not going to trade future draft picks away because I need to retool. So what I've done is I came in with expectations of a title contender. I can see the writing on my wall and I can be honest with my team and myself. I don't have it this year. I'm still going to make the playoffs. I'll probably win my division, but winning it all, it's going to take a lot of luck. In that scenario, if you're in that situation, trade those receivers. Trade a Devontae Adams. Float it out and see if you can get a CeeDee Lamb. Because you know what's going to happen? You're going to extend that window. You're going to have a stud on your hand in Lamb for the next 4 or 5 years. Where's Devontae Adams going to be at? He's going to be 29 next month. Maybe after this year, maybe he has one more really elite year and maybe a couple of good wide receiver 2 years. Based on the numbers, that's how it's going to be. The odds-on favorite, maybe he breaks those rules. I don't know, but why take that chance? Trade an extra year of elite production to maximize trade value. So I hope you found this information informative. We're doing the same thing for running backs. Running backs is even worse than receivers in terms of when you should really be trading them. We all know that their shelf life is much sooner. Even receivers being at age 28, running backs are even lower than that. So stay tuned. Be on the lookout for that one. That's pretty informative, and that's another reason why I draft running backs last. As you can see, this all makes sense. Take your receivers first. As they start to marinate a little bit, that 21, 22, 23 in that range. And then by the time they hit 24 and get that 24 to 28 window of just being ungodly, that's when you get your running backs. Because they produce quick and they burn out fast. So thanks for joining me. If this is your first time here, if you found the information informative, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing the video. Anything you can do to support this channel and help this channel grow would be much appreciated. I know a lot of people who do follow, who do comment and like would appreciate it. It's going to help me pump out more content and get us out there to the masses. Again, if anyone has any specific videos or topics they would like me to cover, please comment them down below right there. If you do that, I'll be sure to get back to you and see what I can do about covering that video. All right. Everybody have a great night. Stay safe.